Welcome. You are listening and watching simultaneously Rashkin Report in English and, of course, Silicon Curtain, of which I congratulate you and welcome you and invite you to press like and subscribe. My name is Yuri Rashkin, and with me is Jonathan Fink, and we are here to discuss I guess the Russian threat seems to be the thing that kind of fundamental here. But Jonathan, our president of the United States, seems to be a really awfully big fan of Russia, more so than I think most Americans could have possibly imagined.
It is quite extraordinary given the levels of, I would say, humiliation actually directed at not just the president himself, but his retinue and the entire nation. You've got Lavrov arriving in a USSR t-shirt, which is basically, hey, it's like the zombie movie where you thought you'd get rid of all the zombies, but no, they're back. Not only back, but they feel that they're winning.
They are, and they feel they're winning. And with the way our president behaves, where he, as was pointed out so much in Ukrainian info space, the red carpet was tucked under and made look nice at Putin's feet by American soldiers who were bending over, and Trump, who was applauding to Putin as if this is a man who came from the cold, like an exchange of spies or something. And here he is, or Nelson Mandela. I don't know what to compare this to, because this was a legitimization of Putin, of this barbarian who is now and must not be such a barbarian if he's on good terms with President of the United States. And in the United States, I feel like those pictures were actually not as important as the fact that Donald Trump came back with nothing. That he went in there with a certain set of expectations. He said that he will not accept anything less than a ceasefire. And then he came back saying that he doesn't really need a ceasefire. He wasn't looking for it. I mean, let's be real. And today he added that Putin and Zelensky are like vinegar and oil, and just can't seem to find a way. I'm thinking maybe a piece of white bread like Donald Trump could bring them all together, but they just don't see it that way.
That's it. Why can't they just break bread and salt together, just like Ukrainians were supposed to greet the liberating Russian troops in 2022? It's a mystery as to why they can't get on. I mean, obviously, there is the implication here, and people immediately reach for the whole compromat, etc., etc., etc. There is a simpler explanation. The simpler explanation, it seems to me, is that Trump doesn't understand. He's so far out of his depth. He has no context. He has no really compulsion to learn the context. He's not got anyone around him who has the balls, let's say, to confront him and say, sit here, you orange moron. You need to listen up for a bit, because this is important information. So no one is going to sit him down and give him the information he needs. Rather, I get the impression that, he gets stuck in a room with Mark Rutte, von der Leyen. You have, the cream of European leaders coming over. They can't tell him directly as they would speak to other leaders. They have to almost talk in parables and stories, which is what we heard the other day. This odd thing he came out and said is, I think this is quite an interesting change of tone, is that actually, Ukraine isn't winning because, well, we haven't let them win, or not we really, but rather Biden hasn't let them win. And it's like a team that's only allowed to play defense. Well, that's a rather interesting framing, which he hasn't used before. But it seems to me that that is a kind of parable type story that someone has wrapped up in a little napkin, as it were, and repeated to him over and over and over and again until they're sure he gets it.
First of all, I have to acknowledge, Jonathan, the way you say, I really like the way you say orange moron. That was really great. Also, I think when it comes to parables, I can't think of a better parable than the security guarantees. that they kept talking about, which is like, what are you talking about? Are you just trying to say that you can't make a deal with Putin because he's going to violate every deal, and United States under President Trump is not going to show up and do anything? Is that what you're referring to, security guarantees? Because there is no guarantees from Donald Trump. Donald Trump and security and guarantee are words that are not present in the same sentence. So why would you be speaking about it? Oh, you're trying to explain to us that you don't trust Putin. Well, I think that's fantastic, but when we have a president who is not able to provide any pressure on Putin, this is the kind of, Aesop's language of fables that we see. I think in the tweet about the you can't win war without attacking the other country, because to me, and maybe you disagree, Jonathan, to me, it's more about trying to hint at a weakness that Putin has, and also to kind of point to how Donald Trump operates, which is he is going to be with the winner. So if Ukraine is going to be winning, he's going to be with them, and Putin should be aware of this. But it's more of a presidency where you do the thing first and then you ask for forgiveness, versus asking it in advance, because Trump may change his mind. But if he sees you're successful, if you're like Israel and you're taking care of Iran, well, then this is Donald Trump's victory in the first place. So I think that he's kind of trying to hint at some pressure at Putin, because that's all he's able to do.
I mean, he has so many levers in his hand. And I put out an episode yesterday that said basically that Putin has no cards. This was with an interesting Russian chap who's currently in Uzbekistan, and fled in 2023. And I think this is true. Putin does have no cards except one. He has a trump card, and that's it. He has nothing else left anymore. The trouble is, from the intense, how should I say it, sort of, the bragging rights he got from Alaska, the sense of palpable victory, at least a PR victory, that we get the impression from state media and from Putin's retinue, and that sort of implacably smug grin he had on his face, even when the discussions were curtailed, and even when, I don't know which side really prompted this, but the meal that was supposed to happen didn't take place. Putin had this implacably smug grin on his face, which gives me the sense that he felt that he was the absolute and outright winner of everything that happened, even though clearly something went horribly wrong during that summit.
It's possible, because, I mean, who would want to miss the lunch in his honor? As we know, it was a dinner and a lunch in honor of His Excellency Vladimir Putin, from the leaked menu that was found outside, at some printer. Yes, but I think
accidentally left in the photo coffer, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think perhaps Putin did not want to leave any physical evidence of his being present there. The old joke about Putin traveling with his own suitcase for his own excrements. It's who knows, but how long do they really need to, if they could discuss everything in that limo, sitting one-on-one without anybody else there? Maybe that's all they needed the time to figure out, where Trump wanted to confirm with Putin that Putin isn't going to release the Epstein tapes that he has and the information that he has access to. And Putin wanted to confirm that Trump is going to continue pressure Ukraine into surrendering. And I think as long as they're on the same page, do they really need to have lunch? Maybe not so much. I think Donald Trump wishes that for some reason he wants Putin to be his best friend, his buddy. But I don't think even Putin wants to hang around Trump longer than he has to.
No, I mean, the only person who seemed to want to hang around was Elon Musk, and I suspect he was, off his head for most of that time. It's quite understandable, because it's the rambling nature of the kind of word salad, and one gets the impression from the sort of candid biographies that have been issued in Trump's first term, that behind the scenes it's it's not all sweetness and light. He has these sort of meltdowns, and he has these intense shouting matches, and it's kind of quite sweary behind the scenes. I can imagine no one really wants to spend too much time in that toxic environment. But here's the other thing: is it seems to me a complete misalignment, and unfortunately, this is a misalignment not just between Trump, but it seems to be so many analysts, so many people in the media got sort of sucked up into this Alaska summit. Is the war going to win? Blah, 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 blah. I don't think Putin came to this summit expecting any movement towards peace or wanting any movement towards peace. I think he simply came to the summit wanting to get permission to continue the violence and get some assurance that there wouldn't be secondary sanctions or any limits placed on him. The bragging rights, the sort of PR victory is supplemental, but he fundamentally wanted to get permission to continue the killing. And that was it. I think everything else is just distraction and deflection, which unfortunately so many analysts, so many people in the media, so many politicians, and I talked to a few, just before the summit, so many people got sucked into this delusion that somehow we're on a fast track to peace. It's ludicrous. It's absurd.
I have to agree with you, because it's hard to imagine that all of a sudden this war that was not ending because of insufficient sanctions and insufficient military aid was apparently not able to be ended because President of the United States refused to participate in negotiations prior to Donald Trump. And so, but now that Donald Trump is willing to negotiate, everything is going to work out. It's obvious that for Putin, this was a good development, because he was looking at some mysterious 50-day deadline, after which who knows what could have been happening. But apparently this was just a way for Donald Trump to force Vladimir Putin to go on a date with him. And so Putin decided it was better, easier to show up and deal with Trump for 10 minutes or whatever, a couple of hours, than deal with the secondary sanctions. And like you said, to get permission, essentially, and the attack on the American factory in Ukraine is perfect proof that permission was acquired, whether it was silent or whether it was explicit. Putin understood that he can continue doing anything he wants, including attacking American interests in Ukraine. But I think for Trump, this was also about looking for a way to not just meet Putin, which is amazing for him. It's like the tops to meet Putin. But also, I do believe, to continue to distract attention from the Epstein case, which continues to play a very important role here in the United States, to the point that today, when there was a search in the former National Security Advisor John Bolton's house, a theory that's emerged is that the search was timed to coincide with release of some more information on the Epstein case. So if everything is tied into Epstein case, then why wouldn't Ukraine and Putin as well?
This is it. And if one takes the conspiratorial point of view, that actually there's a degree of collusion between Putin and Trump. And I'm not saying here that Trump is just a simple, basic asset, but if there is a collusion to create events, to create noise in the media, to distract at key points, then that makes sense. It could be of mutual benefit in terms of the timing of these. One only has to think as well of the Iran strikes and some of the sort of rumor mill that is going around there. The idea that actually Trump gave Putin a heads up so that he could get his staff, his nuclear engineers, etc., out of there, so that they could help the Iranians get a lot of the critical equipment to safety before that bombing took place. And the lack of real Russian reaction to that. I mean, if we're going to be extremely conspiratorial, then there may well be a very high degree of collusion to try and deflect and distract. Putin may well want to keep Trump in office for as long as possible, on the understanding that this eventually will be a burnt asset, that eventually that platform will be so wrecked that he will no longer have that sort of, dare I say, influence or collaboration there. But as long as it's ongoing, it gives some real advantage. to Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think that if we look at Putin as somebody who is known to be a tactician but not a strategist, this fits in. Yes, he's going to get the best out of today and hope that tomorrow takes care of itself, and then he'll do something else tomorrow. But in the meantime, today, Trump just invited Putin to the World Cup opening. And this is something that makes my job as a, I don't know, amateur news analyst a little, I don't know, even more predictable. Because if how can what analytics can you offer, analysis can you offer when it's so obvious? Trump is just, we're discussing whether he's in love or in lust or what is going on, or in fear. But he clearly thinks that there's nothing better for the United States than to be friends with Russia. I just wonder to what extent all the imagery that seems to play such an important role in Russian propaganda designed mind, whether it actually matters outside of Russia, whether it just looks like silly embarrassment, or whether it is has any sort of significance in terms of messaging. When we see a tank that has an American and Russian flag on it, prior to being destroyed, or if we see two dancers, a boy and the girl is wearing a Russian flag and a boy is wearing an American flag, like all of those things where Russia is now proudly pointing out that they are friends with America. Is there, because we do have people like John McCain of today, Lindsey Graham. How sad is that? But this is the man who now reminds everyone that Russia can be a terrorist state, and that they should watch out and better not cry because Lindsey Graham is coming to town. But President of the United States is just friend of Putin. It's just what it is. It's just that obvious.
And could this also be part of his, extreme narcissism, that basically the world is made up of players and nobodies? It's a little bit like Blade Runner. You're either Blade Runner or you're little people. You're nothing whatsoever. And could it be that Trump's perception of the world is literally on that level? There are certain people that absolutely matter, and I will dedicate, I was about to say, some brain power to it. That's really not the right phrase, is it? I will dedicate a few brain cells worth of time to certain people like Vladimir Putin, people who are peers of mine. Everybody else is just non-existent. And it seems to me that there's a complete lack of empathy or even understanding. There's a lack of understanding of why Putin would attack and carry on attacking, because that doesn't fit into a sort of transactional mindset. But at the same time, Putin's my friend and he said nice things about me. Zelensky, not so much. And he's not a peer in any case, nor any of these little Europeans that sort of buzz around like flies that you might swat away at a picnic. No, there's Xi and there's me and there's Vlad and there's the lovely guy from North Korea. And it's almost like they're in some kind of sort of soap opera together. Everybody else is, like in a computer game, they're what's the phrase? They're NPCs, they're not the main characters. They don't have any agency.
Well, I think that's how Donald Trump seems like has looked at life his whole existence. But knowing whatever, I've come to know about Putin and seeing what I've learned about Trump, it's this whole system of values is based on greed and fear. And they want to make as much money as possible. And we see that Donald Trump is raking it in right now in all sorts of ways. And he's trying to appeal to Putin on the financial level, which is a mistake because Putin doesn't care about, he's just beyond that in his projects. If you want Ukraine, it's not about the money anymore. And on the other hand, it's totally fear-based, where maybe Trump is not really in love with Putin as much as he is terrified of Putin and wants to be close to him for fear that there will be a reprimand. Or maybe he enjoys the work that he does, being Putin's second man out there, being Putin's number two, and being in charge of this great big country called the United States. I think it's there's different possibilities of what is driving him. But when people are asking me kind of like, where are the nurses? Why hasn't somebody come in to like disable this? This Trump is broken. Look at the people that he put in charge of those agencies. I say that he is kind of like the main doctor and the main patient in this hospital, because he's got the guy in charge of FBI, the person in charge of CIA, the person in charge of National Intelligence Agent. Those are all people, and Attorney General, for crying out loud, who are getting John Bolton into trouble, who are getting Trump critics into trouble. And so to say that the system is going to stop Trump, no. We're hoping that perhaps following elections, there will be at least House of Representatives, which will be able to be a break on some of the ideas. But at the same time, we see how Putin is giving Trump advice on how to build a real democracy in the United States. And I feel like that really has made an impact on Americans almost as much as anything else during what happened in Alaska. Is simply Putin saying that, in normal countries, they don't vote by mail. And to which Trump said, well, yeah, I've always been saying that. See, now Putin agrees with me. And I'm going to be getting rid of the mail-in ballots, which incidentally is how most Democrats vote, because they take voting more responsibly and they don't wait until the last day. They fill out the ballot in advance. But Trump says that now with Putin's blessing, he can get rid of that. So I feel like Americans are feeling like our options for protest are being kind of funneled into more of an almost like an uprising model, because the elections are being shown over and over to be rigged in terms of the gerrymandering of districts, in terms of making it harder for people to vote. It's not rigged, but it certainly is an uphill battle. And it's going to be interesting to see what elections are going to be happening in 26. But at the same time, it's so far away. And I keep thinking about what Ukrainians are telling me, who say that in America, without having Maidan, you're not going to be able to fix this problem called Donald Trump. And I say, no, but the United States would like to get this done without Maidan, if possible. And can we get rid of this danger and set things straight? Possible, but will it result in immediate restoration of trust in the United States? Hard to imagine.
And there's some real problems, aren't there? Maidan worked, I think, partly because many Ukrainians understood that this was an orchestrated takeover from another country, a country they know really, really well. This was an external operation to try to corrupt their institutions and to turn their economy and their society into a kind of basket case that could be controlled by Russia. It's maybe a little bit easier when it's an external enemy and you've got a rapidly forming or reforming national identity. The US here, the enemy is internal, and those who are screaming about the Constitution and democracy, some of them are the ones that are busy dismantling it and busy dismantling all the checks and balances in their own favor. Yes, we can say, yes, it's Russia's fault, but actually the real heavy lifting here is being done internally. It's much more in the character of a genuine civil war for democracy, for hearts and minds. I think that makes it a lot more complicated. The other complication, it seems to me, is that I know many American Republicans who have studied Maidan and who, in the Ukrainian context, cheer it on, think it's a tremendous achievement, and it's an extraordinary and vital part of Ukrainian democracy that they were able to fight back against tyranny. And yet those same people do not see that having any relevance whatsoever in the US. I think that is also part of the problem. It's almost a sort of complete blindness to what is right there in your face. I'm just working on an episode which will come out today or tomorrow, based on the Bolton thing. Of course, a very fast-moving story. But if we look at this in a broad historical context, once you start purging your opponents, that's not just a one-off. I mean, it might start as a kind of distraction that you mentioned there, but if they get away with it, then they'll come to realize that is something you can do systematically. So it seems to me this could be the start of something, rather terrifying.
I think it could be, and I think it is. That's what we're observing is a United States that's turning into a different country than may have been advertised. And when we have a viewer who writes, calls this an orange revolution, I don't know if he's referring to what we need or what we have. But this is a president that shattered all the norms. What kind of confuses me watching this on the inside is the extent to which people in our country have decided that effectively that it doesn't matter quite so much to us our leader is, kind of who alliances are, who he aligns himself with, as long as our personal economic wealth is good. And this is what we saw in the elections when essentially people sacrifice democracy for a lower price of eggs. But ultimately, this is it's misunderstanding on the part of the voters because national security affects our economy domestically, and having a dictator is going to affect our economy domestically. And all of these things, they're not just like, oh, democracy is a beautiful thing. No, it's what makes all of these things work. But right now we have at the same time FBI searching house of John Bolton, and I understand stock market is setting record highs because the chair of Federal the Reserve System, Jerome Powell, hinted that there could be a decline in interest rates. So that means that dictatorship minus, but money in my pocket, big plus. It's just remarkable.
This is one of the problems, I think, is that the question of democracy and freedom, these are big words, but I think they require a lot more nuance when we talk about them. And it seems to me that there are many people who are prepared to put not just self-interest, but definitely self-interest, but they're prepared to put identity and privilege ahead of rights and rule of law. There's a fundamental misunderstanding that freedom is now intimately tied up with identity and with a sense of status and privilege. Whereas really, I don't think democracy has anything to do with those things. In fact, a healthy democracy fights against those things, being, the guiding feature of a political system. But once you get into that rut, I think it's rather difficult because the next step, of course, is nepotism. Because I want to promote people who are like me, who share my values, not necessarily people who are, the best for the position, the best at the job. No, I'm going to do it based on identity politics, based on religious perception, based on this, that, and the other. Very quickly, it seems to me, you move from a democratic meritocracy almost to sort of, it's a slippery slope towards a kind of Soviet mindset where the most incompetent yet loyal start to float to the surface. And then it's a very negative feedback loop.
Absolutely. I believe it's now being referred to as the law of Hannah Arendt, where you have, in a totalitarian dictatorship, you only appoint idiots because those are the people that are going to be supporting you. And it's interesting to have watched people around Trump shift from adults in the room to kind of a generally kooky and crazy people, a little bit like John Bolton, to just plain loyal people who are just going to be loyal to Trump no matter what. The scary thing is that when we discuss these regimes in other countries, such as Nazi Germany, there was a war, and the Nazi regime was defeated from the outside. And so that's, in the United States, we don't have this other America that's going to come and rescue us. We have to do it ourselves. As they say in Russian, rescuing of those drowning is the responsibility of those drowning. So we do what we can, but this is a challenge that this country has never undertaken. And having just come back from a a 2-week vacation in Europe, and in Germany and Austria, and in Prague. It was really, in Czech Republic, it was really remarkable to see the extent to which World War II has shaped the continent and shaped the mindset of people and understanding of what can happen, especially in Germany. And to what extent we lack that in the United States. It's easier for us to imagine a zombie apocalypse than a dictatorship, even though we might have.
I'm not sure if it's frozen everyone there. I don't know if you can still hear me, but certainly Yuri is frozen for me. Yes, as someone said, oh no, Trump's shut the internet down. Maybe someone is listening. Yuri has dropped out. Hopefully he will be popping back in just a second. There's a comment here about Keir Starmer, and I think this is an interesting one. He's made so many errors, communication errors, certainly, choices of policy, but he doesn't seem to be dismantling our democracy brick by brick. He's not imprisoning his opponents. He's not coming out with the kind of word salad. And actually, he seemed to be rather competent at handling Trump in an extraordinarily diplomatic way. So, yes, whereas there's been extraordinary problems with internal policies, and I would say perhaps a weakness in leadership and style, this is not someone who is anti-democratic or dismantling the democratic norms. There are certainly things that need to be improved, including, the right of protest, the right of assembly, and various other things. But we're not on quite the democratic slide, I think, that Trump represents. However, if reform get in, then I think we'll see a very Trumpian process playing out. Here is not Trump in any sense, and I know where I'd rather be, to be quite honest. We have issues, but they're not on the same kind of scale. Let's see if there's any questions sort of coming through while Yuri tries to rejoin us. I know Mr. Jonathan Pierce is excellent at this kind of stuff, doing the live monologues. I have to say I am not quite practiced at that. I usually need someone to bounce ideas off of. So it's not going to be quite the same sort of fluency as you might get with Mr. Jonathan Pierce. But hopefully Yuri will be joining us imminently. I think it's fascinating what the misalignment of expectations around the Alaska summit was. I don't think Putin went there in any sense to put forward peace. He went there simply to get permission to continue his aggression and to spin yet more delay, prevarication, confusion amongst Western leaders, spin the divisions where he could, and make sure that secondary sanctions weren't going to be imposed on his trading partners. And that's partially successful, but I think sort of deadlines, etc., this is just going to drag on and on and on. Putin has absolutely no intention of peace. One, because he almost certainly thinks that he's winning. But secondly, he cannot stop the war, which I think many commentators have pointed out. And Yuri is back. I can stop monologuing.
Yeah, well, you're doing fantastic, I'm sure. My Wi-Fi was turned off by somebody else. I don't know if I'm even what's going on with the signal at this point. I hope it's working, but wanted to reassure everyone that everything's okay, because it seems like these days, you lose internet. It's like, what's happening? Just somebody unplugged it.
Good. Nothing to do with windows or little gifts of sushi left lying around.
Exactly. Just people vacuuming and unplugging things. Um, that's great. So I think that as we're heading into this end of August, wrapping up this experience, what else do you feel we can expect? Will Trump madly try to create this peace process? You will actually walk away from
Well, there is no
arms.
There is no peace process, clearly. The question is going to be, how can Putin string this out? And to what end is he stringing this out? Is this simply one tactical step after another until he perceives that he can be victorious over Ukraine? Maybe his minions are telling him that he could have some kind of complete victory. I think the reality suggests not, especially as Ukraine is now developing long-term missiles, which are coming on stream. It's developing new drone technologies, which are coming on stream. At the worst case scenario is that Ukraine will hold Russia at bay, and they will not be making really, much more advances. Certainly not between now and the spring. And I think it's questionable beyond that as well. So, what is Putin actually waiting for? Is he just simply exchanging the lives of his population for a little bit more time on the throne? And has he got so, dare I say it, sort of tactical that he's only thinking from one day to the next, looking for these sort of tactical advantages, such as Alaska, which can maybe give him a few more weeks, a few more months, whatever it is? We may be down to that kind of level, which is the opposite of strategic. Now, if the allies of Ukraine were to grow a pair, to use the sort of vernacular phrase there, and if they were to develop a strategy, then I think this is the time to deploy it. The US under Trump is not going to give Ukraine any security guarantees. It may supply weaponry via Europe, which Europe has to pay for, but it's not going to put troops on the ground. It's not going to put planes in the sky. It's not going to do anything to guarantee Ukrainian security whatsoever. If Putin reinvades the country, the US is not going to do anything at all to react to that. The ball is in Europe's court, and it's all very well for them to try and keep Trump on side, try to keep the illusion of Ukraine, etc., from going from NATO, which has become something of a zombie organization. And I can see why they want to do that. But frankly, at some point, Europe is going to have to say, we need a strategy to push Russia back. Push it back into its own space and to contain the aggression, the violence, the malignancy that is coming from Russia. And until Europe develops that strategy, well, it's going to drag on and on and on. But I don't think we can anymore rely on the US for not just a solution, but help, even if Europe itself is assaulted by Putin. I think we've lost Yuri once again. It looks that way. We were going to run up to 45 minutes, so we're going to see what happens. This is a comment. Libby Fyodor, you guys having such wise overview, having no influence. Well, I think it's frustrating. It was frustrating during Biden's time, actually, that we could see what Sullivan was doing. And it was, this analysis that we're doing here wasn't really penetrating or changing his mindset. I do know there are people in this space, people who I communicate with every day, who are able to inject some information into Trump's orbit. And actually, his statements over the last couple of days are direct evidence that some of this has worked. So I wouldn't say there's zero impact here. And even if the impact is either not obvious or not happening, it doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing this. Yuri's back. but gone very roboty, I think. I think your internet is still very unwell. I can't hear you, Yuri. I think there's something wrong with the internet there. Yeah, I think someone's got it in for you. Yeah, it looks like he can't hear us either.